All right, let's dive into something we use every single day, but probably never give a second thought to: measurement. We're going to uncover the hidden, kind of chaotic, and honestly revolutionary story of how we all agreed on what a meter is or what a kilogram weighs. And our story, it starts in total chaos. I want you to just imagine for a second. You're trying to build something, maybe trade some fabric with the next town over, but the most basic unit of length, the foot, it changes all the time. Sounds pretty impossible, right? Well, for most of human history, that was just reality. And yeah, believe it or not, the foot was often the literal length of the current king's foot. So what happens when the old king with big feet dies and his son, who has smaller feet, takes the throne? You guessed it, absolute chaos. The length of every rope, the size of every piece of land, every single building plan, it all had to be redone. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a total roadblock to progress. So this period, you could call it the chaos of kings, was just a nightmare for anyone trying to do business or science. Different cities, not to mention different kingdoms, had completely different ways of measuring things, which led to constant arguments and confusion. Just think about how these units worked. The acre sounds practical enough, the amount of land an ox could plow in a day. But what if your ox was lazy, or the ground was super rocky that day? And a pound could actually change depending on whether you were weighing grain or silver. The whole system was based on real life, sure, but it was way too messy for a connected world. And then came a revolution. No, I mean literally. The French Revolution wasn't just about getting rid of the monarchy. It was about tearing down all the old arbitrary systems. And right in the middle of all that upheaval, a group of brilliant thinkers came up with this truly radical idea: a system of measurement for all people for all time. That was the mission: to ditch these shaky, man-made standards and instead tie our measurements to the Earth itself. Something permanent, universal, and something anybody, anywhere, could check. No more kings, no more lazy oxen, just pure, logical science. It was like a declaration of intellectual independence. Now, to pull off this grand vision, they launched one of the most ambitious scientific adventures in history: the quest for the meter. And their plan was as brilliant as it was incredibly difficult. So the definition of the new meter was just beautiful. It was defined as 1/10,000,000th of the distance from the North Pole to the equator. By tying it to the planet we all live on, it would belong to everybody. But to actually create a physical meter stick, they first had to measure the Earth with a precision that no one had ever achieved before. So to do this, two astronomers, Delambre and Méchain, set out from Paris on this crazy, epic journey. For 7 years, they battled treacherous mountains, political chaos. They were even thrown in jail, all while they were painstakingly measuring the land, piece by piece, using a new method called triangulation. It was this incredible test of human grit and brainpower, all just to find one single perfect number. Okay, so once they had their number, they needed to make it real. They had to make it tangible, and this leads to the next chapter: creating physical objects to represent these new universal units. The meter was cast into a platinum bar, and a standard for mass, the kilogram, was made too. And this is Le Grand K. For over 130 years, this one single polished metal cylinder was, by definition, 1 kilogram. Every other kilogram on the entire planet, from the weights at your grocery store to the sensitive materials in a NASA lab, was ultimately traced back to this one object, locked away under 3 glass jars in a vault outside Paris. It was the absolute king of mass. But there was a problem. A really deep, philosophical problem at the heart of the whole system. What happens if the king of kilograms is actually losing weight? Because over the decades, as scientists made copies and compared them, they found that Le Grand K was mysteriously drifting away from its duplicates by tiny, but scientifically huge amounts. The standard itself wasn't standard. This tiny crisis forced science to take the next, and maybe the final leap. If a physical thing can change, even a little bit, then we have to find something that absolutely cannot. And the solution? Well, it was to finally fulfill that original dream of the French revolutionaries, but in a way they could never have possibly imagined: by tying our measurements to the fundamental constants of the universe itself.
This timeline really puts the whole journey into perspective, doesn't it? We went from the total chaos of King's feet to this incredible mission to measure the planet, to a century where a chunk of metal was the boss. And then, in 2019, science took its biggest leap yet with something called the Great Redefinition.
The change here is just massive. The old way depended on one single fragile object in one vault. I mean, if something happened in Paris, we would literally lose the kilogram. The new way? It's completely different. It's based on an idea, a fundamental number. It's democratic, it's indestructible, and it is universal in the truest sense of the word. Anyone, anywhere can recreate it.
So now our standards are literally woven into the laws of physics. The meter is no longer tied to the Earth, it's tied to the speed of light, the ultimate speed limit of the universe. And the kilogram? It's not a lump of metal anymore. It's defined by the Planck constant, a fundamental number straight out of the bizarre world of quantum mechanics.
Okay, I know what you might be thinking. Quantum physics, Planck constant, this all sounds super abstract. But this obsessive quest for perfect precision, it's the invisible foundation that our entire modern world is built on.
Think about it. The GPS in your phone only works because it can measure the time it takes for a signal to travel from a satellite at the speed of light, a calculation that needs a perfectly defined meter in second. Making the tiny, complex chips in our computers requires measuring things at the atomic level. Creating new drugs, running global trade, all of it only works because every scientist and engineer on Earth is speaking the exact same hyper-precise language of measurement.
And so, the journey really has come full circle. We started with the foot of a king, something you can see but totally flawed. We moved to a piece of the Earth, then to a carefully guarded metal artifact. And now, we've landed on definitions that are based on pure, unchangeable concepts. Our measurements are no longer things we can touch, but fundamental truths about how our universe works.
And that leaves us with a pretty mind-bending final thought. We live in a world that is more precisely built and measured than at any point in history, from our skyscrapers to our microchips. But the ultimate ruler for all of that, the very bedrock of that precision, isn't a physical thing sitting in a vault. It's an intangible, universal idea. It's just a reminder that sometimes the most powerful things in our world are the ones we can only hold in our minds.